Social and economic development in Africa is facing many challenges, but that also means that this continent can be an important growth market in many sectors. The Gulf region is already playing an important role in African development. To learn more, we are joined today by His Excellency Yaqub Aba Omar, South African Ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. Welcome to INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you.
Why is Africa attractive to the GCC countries, and what are they getting out of being in Africa?
GCC as a bloc is third highest in terms of the growth of trade between Africa and a bloc, so GCC is doing very well. I think the reason why people are finding Africa exciting is that this is the last frontier. Latin America has been, a lot of people have moved into Latin America, a lot of companies are present there. Asia was discovered in the 80s and 90s, as people would say. And people are beginning to understand Africa a lot better now. We've had some significant success stories where people who have been put off by this image of a dark continent are now feeling more comfortable to get in. And now we find that large multinational corporations are actually having a footprint in all 54 African countries. So they're not being put off by these different barriers that they had, the barrier of perception, the barrier of movement around, and so forth.
What investment opportunities does Africa offer for foreign investors, and what is Africa looking for in the way of direct investments?
I think there's huge opportunities. If you were to look at this as just one big green field, there's vast opportunities. But if you were to look at the needs of Africa, then you can focus on some very, very big specific areas. Our biggest need, and this is one of the things that's holding back, for example, intra-African trade, that is trade between African countries, is investment in infrastructure. We have found, for example, that Dubai Ports has successfully come into parts of Africa like Djibouti, Senegal. They're talking to Mozambique to have a presence in Maputo and so forth. It'll also make a contribution on the energy side because in Djibouti, as you probably know, the UAE has invested several $1 billion in setting up a hydrocarbon energy complex as part of the development of the port. Then we find also that just sheer infrastructure like road networks need to be improved within Africa. Rail networks are being improved. So there's huge opportunities for investment. We are pleased to also say that within Africa, there's very strong mobilization of capital from indigenous sources there. So, we have very large pension funds in different parts of Africa. South Africa's own government pension fund can be regarded as the equivalent of a sovereign wealth fund. It's so big. The second part is just on the production side, the manufacturing side. Here again, it's a largely untapped, nascent area. We have large amounts of people, a huge continent. It's estimated that we have about 1 billion people in Africa, a large market for consumers. So we're finding that people are beginning to move their manufacturing operations into Africa to access those markets better. We're also finding that there are corporates that are emerging out of Africa. For example, South Africa's own major mobile company called MTN has got a presence in about 28, 30 African countries. So you're finding that operators are coming into Africa, corporates are coming in, but there are also corporates that are emerging out of certain countries and spreading into the rest of Africa.
What are the main achievements of the African development process, and what are the continent's development plans for the future?
The progress has been overall very good, but the challenges are still huge. 1/3 of the world's population, of the world's poor population, lives in Africa. We have about 300 million people that live below the poverty datum line. They live on $1 a day. So that's the kind of a sense that you must have about the challenges that we have at the bottom of the pyramid. Then there's also, the potential also is there because we're also having a large middle class that's emerging.
But what about risks of political and social unrest in Africa?
When you talk of political unrest, we need to then say, look, it's within, most of it would be within a democratic framework. For example, if you look at South Africa, there will be a lot of protests, there'll be a lot of demonstrations, there'll be a lot of strikes, but we mustn't see this as the collapse of our society. This is just pure democracy at work. So that's the majority of it. I think you do have, on the other hand, demonstrations that are aimed at turning the regime completely around. People who are backing up their demands for more democratic reform, more rights for individuals and so forth. That obviously needs to be encouraged because we want democratic institutions to survive in the whole of Africa. So people must not be put off by this political unrest. These are the birth pangs of a new continent as we move towards a greater, more deeper democratic future.
What is needed from governments and private sector to foster the economic development of Africa?
We must get away from this idea that government has no role to play. I think Africa has suffered terribly because of the IMF dictates of the 70s and 80s, where they said, reduce government, they must just get out of the way, and so forth. Now we're finding there's a more balanced approach that is being taken, where people are realizing that you need to bring in civil society, government must work with business in ensuring that we have development. So that is the right approach we must take. One. Two is that it is incumbent upon government to improve the quality of governance. We must make sure that we're transparent, we must make sure that we actually are working in the interests of the people. I think business has to work with government, but it also has its own initiatives. They will obviously look at where's the best return for them. But it must not be at the cost of cutting jobs and reducing all the investment and so forth. What we have found, and this is what I'm arguing against, that there are different models of capitalism. There is one model which is a really heinous, terrible model, which we call this free market capitalism, which says cut government out, forget about, just worry about the returns to the shareholder and so forth. The result is that those companies that have following that route have taken a very, very short-term outlook. And I have no doubt that the 2008 financial crisis was a result of that model. Now you find that the other model, the Scandinavian, the European, where you balance development of people with the returns that a company wants. So that you have a healthy return, but you also have a healthy workforce. You have a well-fed, well-looked-after community where the workforce comes from, so that there are markets even to be able to buy your products. So this is a win-win situation. So you don't have this super profits, super bonuses for some individuals, tiny amount of individuals, while the rest of the country, the rest of the world can be damned, because that's the attitude.
What is your outlook for the future of Africa?
I think it's very bright. And I'm an optimist about Africa. Democracies are still fragile. We need to make sure that democracies are deepened and they're kept on the right route. The situation amongst countries that have had some kind of conflicts within it, some memories are still fresh. If you look at Rwanda, Rwanda has done a fantastic job of making sure that the country unites and moves ahead. But some of those memories of those ethnic cleansing and so forth are still fresh. So some of these things are still new and fragile. But I think with the help of the international community, with the help of great leaders that are coming out, with the help of business entrepreneurs that put society's needs in place, and with the help of civil society, which ensures that the quality of governance improves all the time, Africa will be flying high.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.